So I get told many times, Mike, why isn't housing crashing? Why isn't housing correcting? What the hell is happening with housing? It's, if you connect the dots and you kind of see the same patterns across the Commonwealth, it's the same patterns. Housing's not correcting. Housing is not going down. Housing is a big deal, and it's going to continue going up, and this and this and that. That's what all these real estate agents are telling you. It's going to keep going up. Well, there's a reason why they're saying that, and there's a reason why banks keep lowering rates, and they're going to abolish cash and go digital currency, so you can't remove your money from your bank account unless you put it in stocks. Unless you're smart and you put your money into gold, silver, stocks, or something that's not physical digital currency. So, anyways, why isn't housing dropping? Why are governments pulling these hocus pocus jamba juice, and sprinkling pixie dust on everything to keep it going, and the smoke and mirrors, and creating a huge embarrassment to the rest of the developed world? Well, here it is right here. Front page. Canadian mortgage debt passes 80% of GDP for the first time. What does this mean, people? Well, our economies, the underpinning infrastructure of our economies is housing. Now, in the United States, it's a little bit separated. It's segregated. It's divided in the United States when it comes to housing. I'll explain why. The West Coast is entirely in this boat. The West Coast. Washington State, Oregon, and California. California has been being bought up, investors and stuff. Same thing with Oregon, and same thing with Washington State since 2017, when Vancouver introduced the foreign buyer's tax in Vancouver. Foreign investment tax or foreign buyer's tax. A lot of people rushed to King County to buy up the stock down there without taxes. So what happened to that? What happened with that? Well, everyone started moving east. New York is in the same boat, so is parts of Massachusetts. Now, it's created a divide in a housing divide. So you have housing migrants of people leaving the major cities and creating these massive brain drains that you're seeing. So here it is. Canadian mortgage debt passes 80% of GDP for the first time. Now, in Australia, it's the same thing. All their major cities except Perth. Hobart started taking off a little bit because a lot of the people migrating down to Hobart and pushing up the prices. Martin North, digital analytics economist down there in Australia, was saying that there's over 1 million homes, he estimates, in Australia. In Canada, I think there's a lot more than that. And in the United States, there's a lot. I think there's about 22 million empty homes. And the majority of them are on the West Coast and New York, and in because New York, I think, has 350,000 empty dwellings alone. Okay, so let's go on to this. Here we go. So the underpinning of our economies is housing. So now, what happens if there is a correction or there's a crash? Well, we got a problem here, because this is gonna bring us back, our economy back into the dark ages. If they stop spoofing gold and silver and stop spoofing the precious metal markets, you'll see gold take off to astronomical levels within hours of opening the markets. They're gonna have to shut the markets down, because that's how big it's going to be, right? When it comes to that. So here it is, guys. Canadians love mortgage debt, and most households consider it low risk. However, they might love it a little too much. Mortgage debt has seen an astronomical growth over the past couple of decades. This is often attributed to large economic growth. However, the mortgage debt to GDP ratio shows that might be a fib. Canadian mortgage debt has grown at nearly twice pace of GDP, and now has grown to over 80% of its size. Wow. Why is this number important? Debt is future income used today. Remember, guys, you're borrowing for tomorrow. As debt loads get higher, now here's the problem with borrowing for tomorrow. There's nothing wrong. If you're within your means, you're smart, you calculated your expenditures, your cash flows. The problem is when you're not accruing debt to create business, to make more money. You're creating debt to get on the real estate market. And that was something back in the day, 10, 20, 30 years ago. People bought real estate packing groceries at a grocery store. They didn't have to have all this pixie dust and everything to get into the markets. You know what I'm saying? Lower interest rates have spurred this borrowing binge by lowering service costs. However, As people get used to low rates or depend on them, again, binging on them, the stimulus effect is gone. Eventually, you're just left with households increasingly vulnerable to shock. So so here it is. Canadian mortgage debt to GDP is now 84%. The ratio of mortgage debt to GDP reached an astronomical level in most recent quarters. The size of mortgage debt is now equivalent to 84.28% of GDP in Q2 in 2020, up from 69.13% last year. That's huge, guys. 10 years ago, the number was just 59.002 the GDP. That means during that period, mortgage debt grew over 40% faster than GDP. Part of the recent spike has to do with the recession, but not all of it. The Canadian mortgage debt to GDP, there it is, guys. Cha. Could it go over? Of course. Mortgage growth grew 2 times faster as GDP over the past 20 years, even if we dismiss the recent bump in ratio as temporary due to the pandemic impact. We still see astronomical growth. Before the pandemic in Q1 2020, mortgage debt has reached 72.64% of GDP, considering this ratio was just 39.62% in 2000. That's a huge increase, especially if the economy doesn't just bounce back to pre-pandemic levels of activity soon. Mortgage debt in Canada is growing much faster than the country's economy. That's right there. That's it right there. Mortgage debt in Canada is growing much faster than the country's economy. Over the past 20 years, it's grown double the pace of GDP. This indicates a huge dependence on debt-driven growth, which has never historically ended well. So we're going to see Frankenstein's monster. I was discussing, you guys, the banking system, the whole housing markets, or Frankenstein's monster. They're creating this monster. Unfortunately, the monster takes its own life of its own and starts wreaking havoc and kind of roaming around towns and scaring the townsfolk. Now, this is what's happening right now in the markets where it is wreaking havoc. It's taken a monster of its own, and it's hitting people on the dinner tables. And you're going to start seeing a divide in families. You're going to see family fights. You're going to see a lot of breakups because of finances, because people were misled. A lot of people were misled into this primrose path, thinking that the way to go nowadays is through getting on that property ladder because it's the only way. No, the country, Canada, we're paying more money for lumber in Canada than they pay in the U.S., and they're using a lot of our Canadian lumber down there. And that's the scary part of it all. People in Canada need to order lumber from the United States to bring to Canada. I want to paint my Corvette. They want 15 grand here to paint it. There's no dents or scratches. I got to take it down to Oregon. They're going to do it for $2,500. I sent them a video. They're like, oh, Mike, we'll take off the bumpers, the quarter panels. We'll hang them all up. We'll do a professional job. We'll even do some graphics if you want on the car to make it look really spiffy. $2,500. I'm like, wow, that's like 3,300 Canadian. That's like $9,000 cheaper to get it down in Oregon. So you see what I'm saying? Canada, everything's gotten so to build an average home in Canada, like a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom home, you need $700,000 to build a home. That's not including land. So we're getting into a point right now where middle class is completely wiped. Middle class does not exist. It's called the working poor now. I've been calling it that now for 4 or 5 years now on the channel, and it's getting worse. So Canadian mortgage debt passes 80% of our GDP for the first time. This is big news. It is not shocking. And this is from our friends over at Better Dwelling. So if you guys want to check these guys out, I really recommend you guys check out their page. Check out what they have going on. Also, guys, we have uneducated economists coming on the show tonight. And we also, on Saturday, we have Mineko64 coming on the show on Mike in the Night on Saturday, talking about gold, silver, banks in trouble, raising the alarms of banks, banks. He did a video the other day was banks are persuading people to take paper gold instead of physical. So people would go in and try and buy gold at the bank. They say, here's the certificate, take the certificate. And we're going to talk to him about that. We're going to get into in-depth perspective on what's going on with that. And the next Wednesday, on the 7th, I think it's October 7th. I got to check my dates here, but I think it's October. Next Wednesday will be October 7th. That's correct. October 7th. Hopefully we can get Steve Saretsky up and running on the show on trends in the housing market. If he could make it, I would really appreciate to see him and speak to him and find out his perspective on the real estate angle of things, because he's a real estate agent and he's really well known here in Canada. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Lots of love, lots of support. Let's be strong with each other, guys. Share this video, get this out there. I really appreciate your support. We'll talk soon.